Mike sat through his kitchen table. In one hand he held his phone call. He held his cell phone. The other hand was turning a soda can around and around on the scratch for Merrick's surface. The ever-circular can was next to Stephen Reckler's business card. The card was crumbled. Sweat bred the outside of the soda can, and Mike's fingers were wet and getting wetter. Still, he kept turning the can. He couldn't bring himself to do what he knew he needed to do. Mike glanced over to Abby, who sat at the sofa watching a noisy cartoon. Mike wasn't sure what she was watching, but there was howling coming from the set, and a lot of rigorous laughter. It was getting on Mike's nerve. Well, no, the sound from the TV wasn't really what was getting to his nerve. It was Abby herself who was bugging him. As Abby watched the TV, she frankly pointed at it and then looked at her left as if sharing a moment with someone Mike couldn't see. Another invisible friend. What was Mike going to do about Abby's imaginary friends? Looking away from Abby, Mike's gaze landed on the custody paper he tossed on the table when he and Abby had gotten home. He left them face down, but he knew he needed to pick them up and put them away. Abby didn't need to know what was going on. Yet. Mike stood and shuffled the papers in the kitchen drawers. The papers reminded Mike of Jane's plan. Mike's attention shifted back to Abby. See? Abby whispered. Bears can do that too. A horrifying thought leaped out at the miasma of confusion in Mike's head. How would Aunt Jane deal with Abby's invisible friends if she had custody? As soon as Mike asked himself the question, he knew the answer. Jane would have had Abby put some kind of institution, and once Abby was put away, Jane could find a way to take all the money from Abby's trust funds. Mike let go of the soda can, wiped his fingers from his jeans, then pulled the business card closer to him. He punched Ragnall's number in his phone. Abby continued to watch her cartoon and discuss it with her invisible friend. Mike stood a deep breath and he listened to the phone ringing to his ear. It clicked. Ragnall's voice in a raspy mode. This is Ragnall. Hi, Mike said. Mr. Ragnall, this is Mike Smith. Ragnall didn't speak. All Mike could hear was the faint sound of breathing coming through the phone line. The guy who stomped out of your office yesterday? Mike tried. More silence. Mike counted in his head. 1, 2, 3. Ah, yes, Ragnall said. His voice had switched to a smooth, then the voice turned gruff. Mr. I can't work nights. Mike pulled the phone from his ear and scowled at it. Man, he really did hate this guy. Mike's gaze fixed on Abby. He grit his teeth and returned the phone to its proper position. The job you told me about. Mike said it between his clenched teeth. Is it still available? Yes, Ragnall said. It's most definitely available. Why? Had a change of heart? No, Mike thought. His heart hadn't changed at all, but that didn't matter. He glanced at Abby again. How soon can I start? Mike said. Mike's car scattered as he turned into the street that led through the most depressing part of the town. He didn't blame the car for its hesitation. Mike didn't want to go down this street either. Profitable and squalid, even though the sun was still gasping on the last of the day, the long, strained road was bordered by testaments of building collapse. On both sides of the cracked and broken apple of the Grampla's sidewalk that ran along it, it was an endless march of the failing enterprising hulk of the descending desk. A boarded-up factory, a Doreen gas station, a small strip mall with only 3 still open, dimly lit business, a restaurant with only 2 cars in the parking lot and a half-dark neon sign, a couple of bars that would make a speedy bar look upscale. This whole area would depress even the most upbeat person. Since Mike hadn't been upbeat in years, he started as a defect, and the area shoved him even further down the dark hole of despair. Keeping one hand on the steering wheel, Mike used the other one to hold up a piece of paper he scribbled Ragnall's directions on. The paper was a cover-up of the custody papers. Mike frowned at the directions, leaned forward to peer left and right through the windshield. Where the hell is this place? He asked. Too bad he didn't have an invisible friend to answer him. Instead of a helpful invisible friend, Mike had Ragnall's voice in a sing-along mode in his head. So here's the deal, Ragnall's voice replayed in Mike's head. The voice rose and fell in a soft muffle as if Ragnall had spoken over the phone. This place, it's pretty out there. It's hugely popular with the kids back in the 80s, but it's been shut down for a long time. Only reason why they haven't given it a wrecking ball treatment is the owner kind of sentimental. Just can't bring himself to let it go. There was something weird about the way Ragnar said, sentimental, but Mike couldn't figure out what it was, then or now. Checking his notes, Mike spotted the turn he'd been told to look for. He urged the car past another scattering business, a next nail salon. No great loss, there was too many of those in town anyway. The new street was narrower than the last one, and after just a couple hundred feet, it was no longer bordered by old businesses. Tick stands and tall trees pressed close to the road. It felt like Mike was heading into a countryside. Before things get too ruly, though, Mike saw a deserted parking lot. It was just as Ragnar had described it. Mike turned his signal. Out of habit, no one was around. He pulled off the road, into the lot. As his car crept forward, swords of drying leaves skimmed across the cracked pavement illuminated by the car's headlight. A few paper cups, discarded newspapers, and a wop-wop fast food bag scattered past the leaves. Mike pulled his car further into the lot designed to hold at least 50 or more cars. Judging from the faded to almost invisible white paint demarking of parking spots, it hadn't held that many vehicles in a very long time. Mike pulled into what once would have been a prime parking spot just a few feet from the night shrouding entrance of the building that was so hidden in the dark. It was a little more than a sprawling shadow. Surrounded by trees and far removed from other businesses, the building had no exterior lights. The old car's headlight did little to give Mike a complete picture of the place. All he saw was a red double door and a boarded-up window. Mike turned off the engine, typically, and clanked for a few seconds and then went quiet. Mike looked at the side window. Even though only minutes had passed since Mike had reached this part of town, dusk had abruptly given way to the night, a night completely lack of any sort of lightning. Mike was 100% sure he was not in a safe place. But there was no turning back now. Looking left and right, Mike steeled himself. He picked up the backpack he loaded his overnight needs in. He got out of the car and slung the bag over his shoulder. Making sure his car was locked, as if anyone would want to steal it, Mike took a few steps towards the barely visible building entrance. Once again, Mike heard Ragnar's voice in his head. Back to the rasp. Anyway, there's been some troubles with break-ins over the years, Ragnar said. Vagrants, drunks, obviously not ideal. No kidding, Mike said out loud. He looked around. Turning full circle, he seemed to be alone. But there was a lot of the place to stay concealed. He gripped the flat strap of his backpack and thought about what he packed. He thought he remembered everything, but like a thought, he hadn't thought of the flashlight. Suddenly, Mike wanted to be inside the building. He felt way too exposed. Hurrying forward, Mike leaped toward the double doors. The doors were faded red, and judging from the few dents of the panels, they were made of metal. He quickly found a security pad next to the doors, just where Magna had said it would be. The code was an easy one. Mike had it memorized, so he quickly typed it in. A loud click came from the door. The disengaged latch, Mike figured. He stepped in his left and grabbed a thick Victoria black metal handle. He pulled open one of the heavy doors. The door creaked. Of course it creaked. Mike ignored the shivers that frisked down his spine. Felt like one of those dry leaves from the road had gotten inside his shirt and was tumbling and over towards his tailbone. Mike stepped into the building, leaving the door open just in case. Mike hesitated on the edge of the deep gloom. He inhaled several odors that made him doubt whether he made the right decision. The air smelled stale. Not a surprise for an old, mostly unoccupied place, but more than just musty air met Mike's nostrils. Beneath the resounding clank nearby, Mike straightened up out of his black sneakers. He roared. Either the wind had shoved the door, or it was a self-closing hinge. The door was shut. As threatening as the deserted area outside had felt, the closed door was even more powerful trigger of Mike's flight or fight response. His heart raced double. He had a powerful urge to throw himself at the door and run for his life, which was silly. Get a grip, he told himself. Mike's words seemed to caper away from him before coming back. The faint echo rotated him around. He ignored the disinterred smell of the place and studied his surroundings. Barely lit beneath the floor light panels that were old, dim bulbs and dirty frosted glass coverings. The expanse in front of Mike was a large, maybe 30 feet around lobby. The right and left sides of the lobby were lined with low, red vintage-covered benches. The opening of what would look like a long hallway extended off to the right. The other side of the lobby, opposite of Mike, was a large archway. A little shone through it. but not enough for Mike to see what was beyond it. Although the lobby lighting was down in the feminine ding, Mike could see enough to strike up the lobby's almost circular interior. The walls above the benches were striped red and white, and the floor beneath Mike's feet was covered in black and white checked aluminum. The aluminum was cracked, and whole sections of it was peeling away on the floor, hanging on the stride walls. Flows of large old-fashioned posters with glass advertising Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Mike took a step forward. His shoe caught on the curl of the lament and it cracked. Once again, Mike heard Ragnall's voice in his head. The security system's dated, but it's fully operational. Floodlights of the exterior, cameras inside and out. Fair warning, the power can be a bit screwy. If you have any issues, you'll find the system breaker in the main office. Just give it a flip. As soon as Ragnall's voice faded from Mike's brain, the already weak overheard lights flickered. Mike looked up at them. Oh no, you don't. He better find the office, he thought, quickly. Mike crossed the lobby and looked down the hallway. The 6-foot wide corridor was long, and it wasn't any better lit than the lobby. At the far end of the hallway, 50 feet away from Mike, a bright red exit sign glowed. Mike used that his North Star as a step forward into what felt like a creepy dark tunnel. Ragnall's voice spoke up in Mike's head again. Mike made a face. He really didn't like having the raspy sings-on automatic voice in his head. Now, Mike heard Ragnall say in his memory, the rest of the building is a different breaker, which was probably installed back when Ragnall was still in office. Mike mentally hit mute on Ragnall as he carefully continued forward. Mike kept his gaze sweeping left and right as he went. Mike's footstep made a split tap sound as he walked over more of the old black and white aluminum. Mike could hear his breathing too. He was still on edge. The hallway's walls were painted on the same red and white stripes Mike had seen in the lobby. They were also lined with large frame posters. These posters, however, weren't pizzeria advertisements. They were more art than marketing. Some of the posters had images of pizzas and playing children. The rest of the posters featured portraits of odd-looking cartoon characters. One of the images was a brown bear wearing a bow tie and top hat. The bear looked friendly enough, but Mike took pause when he continued on and spotted a bright yellow chick wearing a bib and holding a googly-eyed cupcake, a bluish-purple bunny gripping on an electric guitar, and a fox wearing an eye patch and sporting a lethal-looking hook at the end of one arm. The toothy grins of these critters didn't look as big. Mike found the fox especially to be disconcerting. The fox one's covering eyes seemed to sparkle with good glee, but the way the fox brandished the hook suggested that the immobility was a facade. Mike kept looking. Above him, another blink of fluorescent lights dimmed the lit. Ragnall's voice returned to Mike's head. My advice to you? Don't mess with anything, unless you know. You got a burning desire to die in an electric fire. No pun intended. Ha ha. Mike sighed as he looked up at the feeble lights. Mike took another step, and he stiffened when he heard a loud crunch. He looked down and relaxed, just broken glass from one of the poster frames. Mike looked up at one of his right. He featured all 4 of the cartoon animals. All but the fox stood on the stage behind the old-fashioned microphones. The fox was off to the left, on his own purple carton stage. Something about the separation felt threatening to Mike. He quickly went past the poster. He looked ahead and spotted the door he was aiming for. Ragnall's voice kicked in again. You'll find the office at the end of the main hall. Last door on the right. Mike reached the door. Like the main door of the building, it was a red metal scarred and dented, very dented, and it looked like someone or something had tried to bash the door in. The fluorescent glass window in the upper part of the door, however, was intact. Strange. Mike frowned at the dents, but he reached to the black knob. It turned readily, and Mike eased the door open. Once again, he was tense, poised to flee. Geez, he thought, why am I so freaking jumpy? When Mike stepped into the office, nothing attacked him. Nothing reassured him, though, either. The office, dimly lit and the only red round blaze coming from the colored bulb above the large breaker box of the prominent red handle, was small and confined. Probably because of the single red bulb, the room made Mike think of a command room in submarines. The sensation of being submerged was heightening not just by the room's darkness, but also its rank air. The last time Mike had smelled something like it in the air in his room, he's been in a boxing gym with a friend. The smells there had been a combination of sweat and blood. Mike's nose twitched as he looked around. He might as well get used to the smell and familiarize himself with this place. This is going to be spending a long time here. The office was pretty sparse. It contained a long, narrow black metal desk. It was set in front of him in matching skisserette, a small black fan, and a landline phone next to the answering machine set on it. The desk held an old TV sitting on top of equally old VCRs, a desktop computer, and several CCTV monitors stacked on a rack at the back edge of the desk. Two gray metal cabinets were pushed against the wall opposite of the desk. One of the filing cabinets was missing a couple of drawers. The other was badly banged up along the front, if it had been knocked over. Mike's gaze dropped to the floor. He saw a long scratch mark that seemed to match the length of the filing cabinet. The marks didn't make him any happier than the office smell did. Mike pulled his gaze to the scratch marks. He looked up in the fluorescent lights above him. He noticed the blank of lights was next to the Ethereum speaker. Mike looked forward to the breaker box again. Next to the breaker box, a large gray metal locker stood alone, looking like it had run away from its friends from a high school hallway. Mike raised an eyebrow. Was he supposed to keep his stuff in there? Mostly you'll just be hanging out in the office, Ragno's voice played out in Mike's head again. The job's pretty easy. Just keep an eye on the monitors and don't let anyone in. Piece of cake, right? The very second that Mike's inner ruffling voice stopped, the feeble lights in the office and the hallway went out completely. All the electricity cut out. The only remaining illumination came from the red emergency bulb. Uh-oh. Mike said. Nope. He immediately strode towards the bulb and grabbed the lever in the breaker box. As he shoved the lever upway, Ragno's voice started up again. See you on the flip side, Ragno had said.